Well, this goes back to the whole stoned ape theory.
Yes,
that's
yes.
another rabbit hole we could go down.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I think that's one of my favorite theories that Terence came up with. It's much more easy to comprehend than time wave zero.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it's another one of these theories. It's circumstantial evidence, but it's probably true. Terence actually didn't come up with it. It was my idea.
Oh, it was your idea.
But, we shared ideas. I mean, he wrote the book, Food of the Gods, and he, it's a great book if you haven't read it. It's definitely worth reading. Mm-hmm. And it is this idea about, but I have elaborated on that idea. And what's interesting, he suggests that mushrooms were used quite by ancient civilizations, and my theory is that mushrooms were probably the oldest psychedelic that humans have ever used, and may have been used as long ago as 2 million years, and may have had a lot to do with the evolution of our neural structures and our consciousness. Don't look at me like that. This is not such a crazy idea. There's inferential evidence for this. So we know that hominid populations evolved in Africa around 2 million years ago. And although the fossil record is incomplete, obviously, but we have a pretty good idea of the lineage. There are fossils starting with the first true hominids. Homo habilis was probably the first hominid, and then there were different lineages that appeared. Homo erectus was part of this. There wasn't a single lineage. There was actually various species in this environment that were interacting and interbreeding with each other. And eventually some emerged as the dominant species. So Homo habilis, Homo erectus, eventually Homo sapiens. Mm-hmm. And over about 2 million years, the size and complexity of the human brain expanded, basically tripled inside. Homo habilis, the brain of Homo habilis was small by comparison, about 500 cubic centimeters. Homo erectus, somewhat larger, maybe 1,000 cubic centimeters. There you go. That's, yeah.
Oh, yeah. We went over this with...
Was it Gallimore?
No, we went over this with Michael Masters.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that could be. I've got another chart.
He's an anthropologist.
But this is a good one. So Homo sapiens has the largest brain. Actually, Homo Neanderthals have a slightly bigger brain.
Right.
But they're also much bigger people than Homo sapiens. Mm-hmm. So brain to body mass, that's about 1,500 centimeters, And so the fossil evidence is there. What's also there is that in this environment, there's fossil evidence that there were cattle. These have been found. These people were living with cattle. They were hunting cattle. They were probably eating cattle. If you got cattle, you've got mushrooms.
Would it have to be cattle? Could it be any other sort of megafauna?
It could have been. I mean, yeah.
Or
it doesn't have to
mammals?
Be cow shit that mushroom grows on.
Right.
But we do know from fossil evidence that the ancestors of the modern cow was in this environment at that time. And we know from paleoclimatology that it was a wet environment. The Sahara is a desert now, right? Yeah. But at that time, from paleoclimatological data, we know that it was a wet. There were seasonal rains, at least. It was lake country. It was savanna. So there was megafauna of all sorts, and it was a humid, wet environment. There had to be mushrooms
Yes,
there.
right.
There just had to be mushrooms there because Psilocybe cubensis. If you go to any similar tropical environment these days, wet with Cebu cattle or similar cows, you're going to find these mushrooms. I mean, they're just there. They follow the cows. And so in this, and these mushrooms in the environment, they're not difficult to spot. I mean, they're big, they're robust. So if you're a hungry hominid looking for something to eat, sooner rather than later, you're going to sample these, and then who knows what that effect would be. But then that's where, these long-term effects of psilocybin on the neural reorganization can begin to kick in, right? But what propagates that over evolutionary time? Well, this process, which is known as epigenetics.
Yes.
Epigenetics is a mechanism where effectively for acquired characteristics being propagated over generations.
And trauma as well, right? Like
trauma, yes, all these kinds of things. Other kinds of drugs, other kind of not so good drugs will also propagate. So Lamarckianism used to be was a theory of evolution that was kind of debunked. That was like, well, giraffes have long necks because they're always straining to get the leaves at the top of trees, right? So eventually they got long-necked. There was something to that. It didn't. Eventually, they got long-necked, and there was maybe an environmental influence, a selection. The tallest giraffes got the leaves. That's how natural selection works. But this happens on a more biochemical level, and it has to do with the unwrapping of segments of DNA that are bound up in these bodies called histones in the chromosomes. And under the effect of environmental influences, these inaccessible segments of DNA can be unbound and expressed. And if the neural changes are related to that, the activation of these segments of DNA, then that could actually be propagated across generations.
Wow.
So that's a plausible mechanism for the stoned ape theory. It's not so crazy. It's like, of course. What else can you think of that would lead to this complexification of the brain, other than the fact that hominids in this environment were extremely, were exposed to all sorts of environmental pressures. But I don't think learning to throw spears better was necessarily enough. But this was something that was part of their diet, and it could have this effect over evolutionary time. I mean, it makes perfect sense. It's one of these theories. It's a plausible theory. How do you prove
it? I was going to ask you, is there a way to disprove it?
There's no way to disprove it that I can see.